Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for joining us. My name is Roshni Kurian, and I am the Education Coordinator at the Canadian Association of Social Workers. Thank you for joining us here today for today's webinar on emerging scholar research on the experiences of young people exiting the Canadian child welfare system and care leaving process. Before we begin, I would first like to acknowledge that the CASW is situated on the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis nations have been stewards of Turtle Island since time immemorial. We also remember those who were forced to come here, particularly those brought here because of the transatlantic slave trade and slavery. We recognize our complicity in settler colonial violence, and we honor our commitments to truth and repairing relationships. We welcome you to take a moment to reflect on the territories that you are tuning in from and the many nations and peoples who have cared for this land. Let us know in the chat box where you are tuning in from. Before passing the podium on to our presenters, I will quickly go through some housekeeping formalities. Today's event will be 1 hour, and towards the end, we will address questions from the audience. Each of the widgets on your screen are adjustable and movable in size, so you can arrange your screen to suit your preferences. There's also live closed captioning in English and French available if you prefer to have captions on. And please type in your questions in the Q&A box at any time, and we'll address them at the end of the presentation. The recording of this event will be available in 24 hours for members to view on demand, and you can use the link that you signed up with to access it. A certificate of attendance will be emailed to you at the end of the presentation, or you can download it from this platform after this presentation is done. And lastly, please do fill out the survey at the end of the session to let us know what you thought. This webinar is being presented in partnership with the with the Child Welfare League of Canada and the Canadian Research Network on Transitions to Adulthood from Care, CANTRAC for short. And CANTRAC is the Canadian chapter of the Global International Research Network on Transitions to Adulthood from Care. So I will now pass the podium on to our presenters to let them introduce themselves. Over to you, Verda.
Okay, here we go. Hello, everybody. It's wonderful to have you with us. My role is to moderate and explain a little bit about this webinar. As Roshni mentioned, we represent the Canadian chapter of an international consortium of researchers who are concerned with the situation of young people who grow up in care and are pushed out at the end of when their services end. And it's an issue of international concern. And we are the Canadian chapter of that international group. We're presenting today emerging scholar research. That's a kind of funny name for it because we have with us today 3 very experienced researchers who are in the final stages of doing their Ph.D. So they're considered to be emerging scholars in the jargon of CANTRAC, but they're very accomplished in their own right. And they represent also the newest trends in research across Canada. So they're going to each present their research for about 10 minutes or a bit more. We're then going to engage together in a discussion with some questions that we've prepared to try to get more of cross-pollination across those areas of research. And then we're going to open it up for discussion with you and concluding remarks. So as Roshni said, I want to encourage you along the way to put any of your questions in the Q&A box. And once we've had our little moderated discussion, we'll open it up to your questions. Now, I'm going to briefly just tell you who we are, but I'm going to ask the presenters to each say a little bit about themselves. In addition, I'm Varda, and I'm from Concordia University from Applied Human Sciences. We have with us Christophe Gauthier-Davies, who's from the School of Public Administration at the University of Quebec at Montreal. Christophe, did I get that right?
Yes.
Yes? Good. Stefan is not with us today, unfortunately. He was called away at the last minute, so you'll see his picture there, and you'll see his slides as we slip over them. Laurence Magnan-Tremblay is with us from the School of Psychoeducation at Université de Laval, and we also have Madeleine Prévost-Lemire from Psychoeducation at Université de Laval. I hope I got that right. And so I'm going to turn it over now to our presenters, who will again tell you more about themselves, but speak to us about their research. So I think, Christophe, we begin with you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Varda, for presenting me. Also, I would like to thank the CANTRAC for this opportunity. So briefly, I will describe myself. I am a Ph.D. student at the National School of Public Administration in Quebec. I've been doing research on youth leaving care for almost 5 years now. I work with the EJEP study, which is under Martin Goyette supervision. I'm also doing my thesis with Martin and Tonino Esposito. My work focuses on youth aging out of care who get involved with the justice system. My approach is part of a broader approach that focuses on contextual factors of youth aging out of care. So I'm mostly interested in the school transition and support networks of youth aging out of care. I'm also looking at other factors such as the placement experience, mostly placement instability, and the type of placement settings. So we often distinguish between youth centers facilities and family fosters. The results of my thesis mainly show that youth who have more support in their social network are less have less probabilities to be in contact with the justice system. And the results of my thesis also shows that youth who have the opportunity to continue school when they leave care have less probabilities to be in contact with the justice system. Some more complicated analysis show a moderating effect of the social support network on placement instability, which means that for you who have many placement instability, the fact of having more social support will decrease the risk of being involved with the justice system. So my thesis also shows some mediating effects of the school transition. This means that placement instability and placement type will influence school dropout, which in its turn will influence the probabilities of being involved with the justice systems. What my thesis involved is recognizing the importance of social support networks and also school transition for programs and policies that are directed towards you aging out of care. This is already the case in the Quebec program, which is called PQG, which implies working on the supportive networks of these youth, and it also focuses on getting them better qualifications. However, there was a report that was published about a year and a half ago, if I remember correctly, showing that this program in itself was not enough to support to increase the social support and to increase the odds of staying in school. And thus, this leads us to think about broader interventions and policies that directly will increase these opportunities and resources for these young people leaving care. This is mostly the work I've been doing for my thesis. It's under the EJEP study. I've had the chances to be at the forefront of the data collection, analysis, and many more projects of part of the EGEP studies. I also work on dual system youth who are involved at the same time with the protection service and the justice system. Overall, the results of the work I've done and my colleagues have done, I should say of the works of my colleague and myself, it shows that the dual system youth are in sort of a have more difficulties. Excuse me. They tend to have less. They have less school opportunities and have less diploma, if I can say it that way. They also have more needs from a mental perspective, and they tend to have less quality intervention. I've also, since I've deposited my thesis for evaluation, I've been at the National Assembly of Quebec as a resident scientist, which started in September. Thank you.
Thank you, Christophe. Okay, we're going to move along now. Oop, Stéphane is not with us. And so, Laurence.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm very glad to talk to you about what I do most of the day, most of the day of the week, all the time. So my thesis, first, my name is Laurence Maillan-Tremblay. I'm a Ph.D. candidate in psychoeducation at the University of Sherbrooke, Varda. I think they have it at University Laval, but Madeleine and I are from the University of Sherbrooke, which is in the province of Quebec. I also represent the Canadian student members of CANTRAC, which is the Canadian chapter of CANTRAC. So really happy to be here. My thesis focuses on the coping process of caregivers while they transition into adulthood. So I'm mostly interested to better understand the challenges that caregivers face when they age out of care, but also the different coping strategies caregivers use to face those challenges, the resources they use to help them cope, how they perceive this process as helping or not, and what they learn from those experiences for the future. Aside my thesis, I'm currently working with Varda on a research review aiming at mapping the care living research in Canada. This has never been done before, and the goal is to map the current knowledge, so what we know on care living in Canada, and identify the research gaps for future research avenues. I'm also working on a project with a group home for young women in Montreal. So for the past 5 years, they have implemented a program called The Loft, which has been designed to help young women to gain autonomy in preparation for their transition to adulthood. So it's normal if you never heard about it. It's often published in gray literature, not in the scientific literature. So those kind of initiatives are rarely known for other people that are not in the small circles around when those initiatives are implemented. So in collaboration with the group home team and the young women who have accessed the Loft, we are currently evaluating the program to help better meet their needs for the future. So Madeleine, now would be your turn.
Yes, and apologies, Laurence and Madeleine, that I got your affiliates wrong. Okay.
No problem.
Madeleine.
So, thank you, Varda. Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. I'm also a PhD candidate in the School of Psychoeducation at Université de Sherbrooke with Laurence, actually, who is my colleague. I did a master in psychoeducation and almost a PhD in psychoeducation. So it's now 7 years that I do research, especially on young mothers who received child protective services as a teen or as a child. Just maybe a small note on psychoeducation. The way we understand it in Quebec is it's a social science, and we are really focused on trying to help a person adapt to its environment, but also of trying to adapt this environment to one person. So it's all in this relation between the person, its needs, and what the environment can provide. So many psychoeducators work, for example, in school or in mental health installation. So I'm finishing almost a PhD in the University of Sherbrooke with Geneviève Paquette and Anne-Marie Touga, who were my directors. I'm interested especially in the complex trauma among young mothers who received child protective services when they were young. I'm doing a qualitative research, so I'm trying to know a little bit more what, from the point of view of those young mothers, what do they feel and how do they react, and how everything from their perspective, so with their own words. There was two aspects to my dissertation. The first one, I was interested into getting a better understanding of what does it look like to have a complex trauma when you're a young mother, and especially what does it look like on one special aspect of functioning, so their relational functioning. How do they manage their relationship? And the other side of my dissertation was this intersection between motherhood or early motherhood and complex trauma. So what does it mean? Can motherhood be a path towards recovery, or on the opposite side, is it something that can hinder recovery from complex trauma? And just maybe very quickly about my result. For the relational side of complex trauma, it shows that the young mother, they unfortunately have a lot of complex trauma-related relational disruption. They have trouble maintaining safe and secure and fulfilling relationships. But at the same time, they really wish to do so. They have a strong desire to engage in significant relationship. So that there's this whole duality between being afraid and of intimacy and having significant relationship, but at the same time yearning for it. And for the other part of my dissertation, it shows that for some mother, yes, motherhood can be an impulse toward a recovery from complex trauma, notably through the sense that they give to motherhood, the sense that the meaning or the signification that a child brings into their life. But for other mother, it actually worsen the complex trauma disruption that they already have, and it makes motherhood something really, really complicated that they need a lot of support to achieve the way they wish that they would achieve it. So that's a little bit about my work, I think.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to move now into a general discussion about these three different groups of research projects, really. And so the first question I really wanted to ask all of you is, what do you see as the relevance, but also I'm going to add the word significance. Why is your topic important for care leaving research in Canada?
Anyone wants to begin? Go ahead, Steph.
Yes, well, if I would try to answer shortly, but I think the results of my thesis is they really address contemporary, I'd say, problems of youth in Canada. More importantly, we see that youth that transition to the adulthood more and more needs social supports, and they also need more school opportunities or any opportunities to try to grow from a personal point of view. I think this is something that really sort of distinguishes youth of our times.
Okay, Madeleine, what are your thoughts?
Yes, sorry, always unmuting the. But for my part, almost half of the young women who receive child protective services will become mother before the age of 25, so will become very young mothers. Among them, most of them will have their first child as they are still receiving services or in the first year after they're exiting from care. So there's a huge population of those young persons that need help dealing with transition to adulthood while being a mother. And so with this high proportion, there's few research that focus on young mothers that were in care. It's mostly in Australia, in the UK, or in the US. In Canada, there is some studies that are exploring the experience of young mothers, but rarely from the point of view of those young mothers themselves. Or often the studies are focusing on the mother who are receiving child protective services for their child. So they leave apart a little bit all the mothers who are successful in preventing this intergenerational service involvement. And also another point I think of relevance is the fact that none of those studies use a complex trauma perspective. And in doing so, you can take into account their traumatic past and its consequences on the way they function right now. So I think it could be very helpful for practitioners just to have this in mind and to have results that takes into account the trauma they suffered.
Thank you. Laurence, would you like to comment?
Yeah, on my end, I've noticed that research has mostly focused on the difficult challenges caregivers face during their transition and the poor outcomes during this period. And I've also noticed that research is now emphasizing that young people need to be able to develop a more active role in their transition to adulthood based on their strength, their abilities, but also a key word that Christophe talked about, which is also having access to a support network and to facilitate their social integration. So in line with my thesis subject, I see that their coping process is a promising avenue to better understand why caregivers adapt better than others during this period of time, but taking into consideration their assets, but also the resources available to them in order to help them adapt during this period of time. So I see that it's kind of looking more a nuanced perspective about their experiences, not only to focus on their difficulties and what bad happened during that time, but also their strength and their capacities.
Terrific. Thank you. Okay. Madeleine, Madeleine, do you want to add something? You have your
Sure, I can. But I think that's an interesting point where Laurence and my research meets, is this accent toward the strength of this population. For my part, the mothers, but for Laurence, all the young exiting from care. And Christophe, maybe you consider that also, I'm sure, in your research, but I feel sometimes it's something that's a little bit left aside. We document a lot the difficulties and what is going wrong, but at the same time, as a practitioner, we are really encouraged to use a strength-based approach. But what does it mean, and what can we really lean on? I think those research and the result that will come from it are important to identify better those strengths and how we can help them, the youth, to have their strength grow.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really, really important point. And I just want to throw in a comment here, which is to say that unfortunately, the early research, and we're in early stages still in Canada, on care leaving in Canada, is very deficit focused. And that's really unfortunate, because it doesn't give a very holistic picture of who these young people are. So thank you for that. So yeah, Christophe, you want to add? Great.
Yes, well, this also echoes to like a criminological research, which from an intervention point of view has always or often focus on what we call risk, but sometimes as a worker, it's hard to work on these so-called risk in a sense that it's something that's negative in their life, and it's not always translate into something that's going to be motivating for youth. So focusing on things that are going well is often a good factor to work on.
Excellent. Fantastic. Oh, go ahead, Laurence. Great.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that in my PhD journey, I felt like as researchers, we have to pay attention of how we use words, and that sometimes those words can be harmful, and the way we use the care leavers' experiences to state the relevance of our research is also like we have to pay attention to that. So we always use their difficulties or the poor outcomes to say that it's really important to do research on that topic. But I think we have to be aware of the words we use, because it's not always a nuanced way to talk about those experiences. And as practitioners too, we always hear about like youth who have difficult experiences or have problems, or like I know better the terms in French, like jeunes en difficulté or some stuff, les jeunes vulnérables, like vulnerable youth. So I feel like we see that a lot, and we have a responsibility in like paying attention of how we use those words, because it can be harmful.
Absolutely. I think it can be stigmatizing.
Yeah, too. Yeah.
So that's, yeah. Thank you for that. Okay. So as we're talking about this, I guess this second question is more about context. What would you say the state of knowledge in Canada is in relation to your topic? And again, Madeline, you addressed this a little bit, but just to give our audience a context.
Sure, because you name me, I can go first. So the actual state of knowledge about young mothers, because I have a very specific population. So we see, I mean, when we study young motherhood among this population, we see that there's two sides of it. For a part, it's not easy. Young mothers are in a precarious situation. As you said, Laurence, low level of education, socioeconomically disadvantaged. So it makes motherhood very difficult. And on top of it, they have many mental health difficulties that, from my point of view, can be considered as a disruption of related to complex trauma. But we don't have right now a study that encompasses all those difficulties in one framework, one way to look at it, which is provided by the complex trauma model. It can really inform us a lot about the general functioning. So overall, what we know now is that young mothers' functioning is affected by complex trauma disruption or something alike, and they have difficulties, especially in the relational side. And the other aspect also that for the state of knowledge is that the young mother, they actually talk very positively of their motherhood. They see it as an opportunity for personal growth. For example, they stop using drugs, they stabilize their life, they sort out through their relationship to all within their mind to welcome a child and to have a positive experience of motherhood. But right now, the state of knowledge is a little bit like in conflict. In conflict, is it something negative for the young mothers and something that is a risk for mothers and their child, or is it something that could be an opportunity for a positive experience? So that's pretty much where we are right now.
Thank you. Christophe?
Well, the actual state of knowledge on the contact with the justice system of you aging out of care in Canada is, to my understanding, pretty low. There's no empirical data on this. So, but there's works outside of Canada, mostly in the United States, which offers some framework to understand, if we can say, the causes or the explanation of youth who get in contact with the justice system. We often see three type of, let's say, explanations. These youth often comes within the system with a various background that make them more vulnerable to entering the justice system. They come from poor socioeconomic background. They have various experience of abuse and neglect. Then the second category of factors is related to the experience itself of being in a placement. They often have many placement change, or what we call placement instabilities. The facilities are often stressful environments. And finally, there's all the context that really relates to the timing of leaving care. So often these youths will have a disruption with their service, which sort of makes them more vulnerable to be in contact with the justice system. But as for empirical knowledge in Canada, there's not a lot of information for now.
Okay, thank you. Laurence, do you want to comment?
Yeah, well, coping has mostly been explored among young people still in care. So studies have explored, for example, how young people cope with past adverse experiences. And very few research has explored the coping process of young people who actually have aged out of care. What we know is that coping is a dynamic process that changes according to the context in which it takes place. Yet, very few studies have explored how this process evolves within the same situation, from one situation to another, and according to the context in which young people make their transition to adulthood. And also, we know that subjectivity is central to the coping process. So we know that very few studies have explored the meaning that young people attach to the challenges they face, their perception of the ability of resources, if they use them or not, and what coping strategies they actually use to cope with those challenges. And Madeleine was talking about how maternity can be perceived as an opportunity to grow. Well, it's kind of an example of how, from an outside perspective, we could talk about maternity as a difficult challenge for young women who have aged out of care. But from their perspective, this is seen maybe as a challenge, but a challenge that brings opportunity for them. So I think it's really, really important to consider their perspective on that. And I think my research will help to better understand caregivers' experience, but in a more maybe positive, holistic, and nuanced way. I think it's really important.
Great. Sorry, push to audience. Okay, we have a third question for all of us here, kind of my favorite. What do you think the most important implications of your work are for practice and policy in Canada?
I want to know why it's your favorite.
Well, I care a lot about practice and policy, and I think probably, I assume our audience would like to hear more. I mean, it's the so what of research is, why do we do research? Really to influence the way things are done, I think. Thank you, Laurence.
Anyone wants to go first?
I can go. Well, okay. Go, Christophe.
No, go ahead.
All right. We're too polite. So, okay. I think I could explain briefly my work, but I see two main implications of my research for practice and policy. First of all, it's a bit logical. I use a complex trauma perspective, so I'm very worried and sensitive about trauma and its consequences in the life of youth who exited care. So the first, if very obvious, is to adopt trauma-sensitive practices when we are working for my population with young mothers. But we say that a lot, adopt trauma-sensitive perspective. But I think in practice, it means that young mothers that we meet are still affected by disruption or traumatic consequences, especially on the relational level. So if we want to support them toward a positive experience of motherhood, we have to recognize that there is special needs and to answer them in a trauma-sensitive way. So it starts, for example, by understanding that mistrust or social withdrawal or conflicts in relationship and even a difficulty to feel or to show a connection to their child, well, it's all logical reaction to the relationship as they knew it until now. And that at the same time, even if they present this very cold and detached face, well, they are longing, I hope it's the right word, for more supportive and fulfilling relationship. So it's really important for the practitioner to be able to provide guidance on how to deal with relationship, having in mind that their goal is to achieve significant relationship. So for example, it could be like with their family of origin, it's always difficult to deal with the family of origin that committed maltreatment, but the young mothers still want their child to be in contact with their own parents, so the grandparent of the new child. So how do you set limit in what is acceptable with your family of origin and what is not? And the same for the partners, also because young women also live with intimate partner violence. So all those discussions about limits, how can I maintain a relation without, while also setting limits is very important. So that would be the first one. I can keep the second one if somebody go ahead. If somebody want to continue, or I just can go.
Go ahead, Madeline. We want to hear it.
I think the other point that is very important following my result is that maybe to adopt an open position toward young motherhood. And this is not obvious because socially, young motherhood is mostly seen as a problem. It's seen as something that is really risky for the mother, for the child. And I could have been a practitioner also that would have kind of been disappointed to learn that the teen I'm working with is pregnant, is expecting a child. So I think we have to question those assumptions or own assumption about motherhood, and also be open to the fact that for some mother, it's a chance towards something better. So we have to, that's it, question our assumption and leave space also to explore what is the meaning of this motherhood for the future or the young mother. And in a way to draw from this meaning, to help them bring change in their own functioning, and to help them achieve the experience of motherhood that they want to achieve, actually. So to leave space for their own, the significance motherhood takes for them, and to help them build on this significance.
Wonderful.
I will go next.
Good.
I will address this in two times, maybe like implication from policies and maybe for more from a practical view with caseworker. So just as a reminder, my thesis is mostly focused on the pursuit of education after you leave care and social support networks. As for the pursuit of education, I think it's important that we have policies that directly support the pursuit of education. So waiving tuition fees, I think completely for these youth, it would be a great policy. I know also there's places in Texas where in universities and college they have liaison officers, I believe that's the word, where you who have experience of care can go directly to them to sort of have information, let's say from more of a technical point of view, to try to really sign up properly, and etc. Of course, having proper policies that allow youth staying in care to pursue their education would be a great policy. Having student housing in college and university for people who have experience of care would also be a great policy. From a practical point of view, I think it's important that caseworker really try to get involved into the technical and administrative aspect of pursuing school. This is often a little complicated for youth, and as a caseworker, I say we, sorry, but I used to be caseworker, but caseworkers have a great power with the different educational systems in schools. So trying to directly get involved in this, sometimes it can help to bypass some let's say red tape procedures or things like this. And as concerning the social support network implication, I think we as a society and policies maker, we have to directly look at what are the options for youth when they leave care, and who are the members around them that could help them. And we have to look at a broader spectrum, not only the direct people who are in the family of youth, but we have to look a little more around if there's anyone else that could maybe have these youths in their house to support them.
Okay, wow, fantastic. Thank you, Christophe. Laurence, what
Yeah.
do you see?
What I will say about this mostly comes from like the literature, because I'm not done with my thesis yet. I'm still recruiting participants. So currently, what I observe is that practices to prepare and support youth in care for the transition to adulthood have mostly focused on autonomy and functional skills. But as Christophe said earlier, those practices do not always produce the desired effect, and they are not enough to improve the situation of caregivers. I think it's the case not only in the province of Quebec, nor in Canada, but all around the world. So we need to also promote approaches aimed at developing young people's personal skills and social resources also. So I think that the results from my thesis will inform the development of practices aiming at developing youth strengths, abilities, while also considering the resources available to them in order to overcome the many challenges they face during their transition. I also wish, this is like what we say in French, a cri du cœur, which is I wish for a more concerted action from research, practice, and policy across all provinces of Canada to help better prepare and support youth, because it's not the responsibility of only a research team or only a practice team or only it's not a local initiative that will change the world. It's all of us. We have to work all together to support youth. So this is it for my cri du cœur. I don't know how it's called in English. Cry for help. I don't know.
Well, a heartfelt wish, I guess we would say, but totally. You're right. We operate in silos now, and that's a big problem. So we're going to move into now our discussion with those of you in the audience, and we have quite a few questions from the audience. So I'm going to do my best. We'll see if we can get to most of them. Okay, here we go. Wow. Okay. I would love to understand more about each of your sampling strategies. That is, how do you sample and recruit for a study about youth who leave care? Who would like to respond to that question?
I could go first because I've had a really, 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 really hard time accessing youth for my project, for my data collection. I was wondering why, and I know that compared to other countries, we do not systematically collect data on national or provincial level among caregivers aging out of care. So data collection really comes from individual initiatives that are funded by the provincial or federal government. So it's really, really hard to access youth for research. First of all, as an example, published research in Canada comes from two main subsamples of youth who participated in the Egypt study, which is where Christophe, your data comes from, and also the study on adolescent girls in residential care youth centers, which is the data from where Madeleine is doing her thesis. So it's really hard to access youth, and when you do, now you can maybe Madeleine and Christophe talk about how you do it, but it's really hard to, first of all, access those youth and know better about like what they have to say about their experiences.
I can jump in because as Laurent said, for my thesis, I was lucky enough. Well, the context is that there is a longitudinal studies on the becoming, Laurent, of the young teenager that were in child protective services. And during my master, I was a research assistant, and I was hired to find all the almost 200 young women that participated to the last time of the study to do a new wave on different topics, among which was motherhood. And it's super difficult to follow them, to track them through adulthood because they were around 20 years old at the time. So I spent, I don't know, a whole summer, I would say, stalking young women from this study and trying to retrace them and talk with them until I could find almost all of them and interview 17 of them about motherhood. But it is a challenge to study motherhood among this population because once they're out of the system, there's nothing tracking them. There's no way to know, did they become mother, did they not, how many child. You have to pick them one by one. And if you didn't have previous contact from the time they were in care, well, it's almost impossible to do. So, Christophe, how is it on your side?
Yeah, Christophe, anything to add about sampling?
Yes, well, I was also lucky enough to be part of a larger research project, which is the Egypt study. Well, the sampling wasn't done myself, so I cannot necessarily speak for it, but I know I'm very aware of it. It was done in every administrative region of Quebec, and it was designed to be representative of these administrative regions. All type of placement facilities were taking into account, so family foster centers, apartment, and more. Initially, there was almost 2,000 youth who were who made like a first cut, I would say, to be part of this study, and amongst these 2,000 youth who met the criteria to be about to leave care, the team was able to reach to about 1,000 of them.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's so. Maybe there's another question. Maybe that you might be able to address, Christophe, based on your last response, which is one of our participants wants to know if we've noticed any trends in relation to differences for young people aging out of care in rural areas, so in versus urban areas. So youth who age out in the city versus youth who age out in more remote areas. And as far as we know, do certain areas of the country experience different challenges versus other areas? Anybody want to address this?
I'm not aware of any studies that specifically addresses this. I know there's a report that was released today that compare, how do we say, indice de défavorisation? Like they compare the socioeconomic status, and you who come from lower socioeconomic status region tend to have poor outcomes. But I'm not aware of any difference between like urban and rural settings, and that's a very interesting question. I often think about it.
Laurence, Madeleine, do you have any comments relative to that?
Well, I feel you, Christophe. I feel like it's really hard to know because research in Canada, mostly, most specifically in Quebec, are done amongst like the two main subsamples that I was talking to you about, and they come from mostly urban areas. Youth from rural parts are probably harder to get in touch with for all the reasons that I mentioned, but we could probably question like the resources they have access to, like transportation, economic resources, everything. That it's probably harder when you come from rural areas. But still an hypothesis because we don't know.
Yeah, maybe I could add, as Laurent said, for the mothers interviewed, they were all coming from urban area, but most of them had left. They were they moved to more rural area of Quebec. And I did not do a comparison, but for sure, talking about resources, it's not the same type of resources. And every problem becomes a little bit more hidden because there's less people around to realize what is happening in the family. So I'm talking about intimate partner violence, for example. In a big city, there may be some people passing by or a neighbor that can alert, I don't know, raise a flag. But when you live in a rural area, that's less happening.
Maybe one thing I can say is I can refer you, if you're interested. This is the last in a series of webinars, and at the first webinar we also addressed a regional variation across Canada. So not so much in terms of rural versus urban areas, but there are huge differences in the availability of supports and even the legal entitlements to support in different parts of the country. It's almost shocking. So yeah, so that's something, if you're interested in, you can watch the recording of the very first webinar, and you can see that there are great inequities across Canada. I'm going to ask now the last question from our participants because we're getting close to the end. Someone here is asking about the importance not only of providing positive social support, but also the opportunity for practical skills once they have exited care. So things like budgeting, parenting skills, stress management. This person saying, I often see a big disconnect between providing youth practical skills and tools before exiting care, resulting in further challenges as they are adults. So I'm wondering if any of your findings or any of your reading of the literature would address this issue about preparation and life skills. Anybody want to comment?
Yeah, well, you've talked about inequities from one province to another, but I feel like from even in the same province, from one areas to another, it's still very, very inequitable how we prepare and support youth for living care. It's really hard to know what we do still because it's often not documented in the literature, the scientific literature. So you kind of have to learn from, how do you say, Varda, bouche à oreille?
Word of mouth.
Word of mouth, like from your network, what initiatives are being put in place. As I was talking about the Loft program that I'm working on, I had no idea it was existing. It has been in place for 5 years. So that's kind of, we have to find like a way to better know what exists, because the law now changed, I think, for the past year, to better help and support youth in care in the province of Quebec. But I think that in the practical field, it's not already, there's not much already in place to help youth prepare, but like universally from one foster care system to another.
Mm-hmm. Anybody else? We have only a few minutes left, and I'm going to ask one last concluding question. So anybody else want to address this issue of practical skills?
I can maybe provide a little word on this. Among the mothers I met, many raised this topic of feeling unprepared, not to be a mother, but to be a grown-up, to be an adult in an adult world. They raised, for example, the budgeting, like they didn't know how to do a budget, they didn't know how to do the tax report, they didn't know where to get like services like it's social, I'm sorry.
Welfare.
When you go welfare, they didn't know where to go for all of that, and many basic skills. Like one said, I didn't need to remember that I have an appointment, because there was always someone telling me, hey, don't forget tomorrow you have an appointment. So I had to learn all of that on top of finding a flat, finding a job, being a mother. So they felt unprepared for this world, but they did felt prepared for motherhood. And maybe a little word on that is that we put forward a lot the parental competencies and how maybe a teenager or a young adult is not prepared to be a mother, but that's not where they felt they lack preparation. That it's really more on the basic life daily skills. Yeah.
Great. So we have one last excellent question, which I think will serve as our concluding remarks, which is, someone asked, could each researcher pick their number one recommendation based on their work to date? What if you only had to make one recommendation, like a punchline? What's the message you want to leave our participants with today? I'll give you a second. We have 3 minutes left, so you have 10 seconds to think about it, and then I'll call on you. Okay? I think that's a great question. Okay, Christophe, do you have?
Yeah, well, just want increase opportunity and resources for you aging out of care. That's
amazing. Okay, Madeleine?
For me, it would be to give an importance to the significance of life events in the life of those young person, like motherhood or like other topics like Laurence. And really, I know somebody in the chat said it's difficult to have this kind of individualized approach, but I think there's so many diversity in their life path that it's important to get to know this meaning for them.
Good. And Laurence?
It's hard to choose. I would say like 3 small things. Still, because I don't have results from my thesis right now, I would say to remember that we have to better understand caregivers' experiences in a more nuanced way. I call for action and commitment for those youth. We say a lot of things, but nothing really happens in real life for them. So get out there, do something, ask help from your friends, from your network, and go out there. This is what I would say. Just do something.
Fantastic. And so hopefully we can all advocate together.
Yeah.
So at this point, and Roshni, are you with us? Just thank you to everyone.
Yes. Yes, thank you to all of you for sharing your scholarship today, and thank you to the greater CANTRAC team as well for delivering this 5-part webinar series to CASW members. This is highly valuable research, highly valuable for practitioners in the field. So thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge. Again, for our audience members, the recording of this webinar will be available in 24 hours, or you can use a link in your email. And you can access the full 5-part webinar series on the CASW website as well. Feel free to send us your questions, suggestions, or improvement for feedback with us using the survey. And a huge thank you again to our guests and to the audience for your questions and your attention. We will see you next time. Have a great day.
Thank you all. And thank you, Roshni and Kashwi, for supporting us.